at all. We run into land that is expensive because of like urban sprawl. We run into a lot of retired dairy farmers that just want to rent the land out for the highest bidder. We're competing with corn and soybean growers, and we need pasture and hay. And so we
have a lot of retired dairy farmers that just want to sit in a combine and a tractor and do cash crop like corn or beans.
And so we had to talk about and think about what we wanted to do. So this photo that you see in front of us, if any of you are familiar with Circle R livestock out of Elmira, that's Ryan and Romy Schill. That is their picture. It's their barn. And we had to sit down and decide if we wanted to essentially go accelerated and into intensive production, or if there was another route that we could go. And Chris already, because we are farming on a land that his grandparents farmed starting in the 60s, and Chris already pastured his sheep. He had been pasturing and grazing sheep for quite some time and really enjoyed it. But we had to make the choice, do we want to incur a whole bunch of debt and build a new barn and new facilities and invest heavily in infrastructure, or was there something else we could do? So I actually quite honestly Googled the company that was running the solar site that is only about 11 kilometers from our house, and found out which company was running it and asked them if they were potentially interested at all in having sheep graze it. And amazingly enough, they were keen. So in the fall of 2017, we did a pilot project on about, how many acres do you think that was?
It was probably about 7 acres we did a pilot project on.
Yeah, it was about 50 sheep, I think, and a ram.
Yeah, it was 2 big 22-foot trailer, like fifth wheel trailer loads of sheep.
Yeah, I think so. So yeah,
that we kind of just threw on the trailer. It was like very seat of our pants kind of deal, to see if we could do what they needed done. So this is really productive land that the site is on, and ground wants to grow stuff, right? And so it was fantastic growing conditions between the panels, and they couldn't mow under the panels between the posts. And they tried those vineyard mowers. It wasn't working.
They tried herbicides.
The herbicide. So if you spray herbicides, what happens is you lose the sod and you get like the trees, right? The trees are like the first things to come back. And it's Manitoba maples, it's hawthorns, it's all the nasty stuff. So they were really struggling, and to pay their techs to do the trimming, it was crazy expensive. And we had a crazy drought here in 2012, and I taught my sheep, if you're going to live here, you have to learn how to eat trees. So I had no pasture, we had no hay, I had no grass, and hay was $90 a bale. So, which isn't profitable to feed the sheep, especially in 2012. So I went to the bush every day with the chainsaw and cut a tank full, like a fuel tank full on the chainsaw of trees. I'd fall trees, and I'd cut the limbs down. The sheep would eat the leaves, and they weren't full every day, but they were in good shape. And I actually expanded the flock that year because of that. So knowing that they had an issue with trees and this kind of stuff going through the panels, I knew my sheep could handle that. So we did the demo. We've changed a lot since then.
Yeah, exactly. So the fall 2017, it did go well. One of our biggest things, and we always get this question, is do the sheep break the panels? And also, and I think some of our pictures might show it, there is of course wiring. So a lot of the wiring goes into posts and it's buried underground, but there are wires on the panels. And one of the things that both the site and we were worried about is whether or not our sheep would chew on or get caught in any of the wiring. So the pilot was a really good way for us to show sort of what it would look like to have sheep graze under the panels, but also on a very small scale, look at what are the risks, what are the costs, what it might look like to have sheep on site. So it was a successful pilot. And in 2018, we moved, so late in 2017, we bought 100 ewe lambs from Amherst Island from a pasture-based flock. And in 2018...
It was Foot Flats, and they're the best place to buy sheep.
Okay. There's lots of places to buy sheep, but for our system, it was...
Foot Flats is the best.
It was really important to buy sheep that already grazed, that were selected from ewes, that lambed on their own.
Aren't Kijiji
sheep. We can get into that in a bit. But that is a key point in any discussion on sheep management or getting into sheep. Choosing sheep that have been raised in a production system similar to what you're going to be raising them in is really, really key to avoid a lot of the pitfalls that a lot of people are in. And what you're seeing in this picture, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, is our handling system that we did buy. So we did invest, of course, in a couple different things, but this Vino, it's a mobile yard, it's aluminum, it's super light, the gates are aluminum and super light. That is one of the big purchases we made when we went into this full time. And so this came over from the Netherlands, and we did get a grant.
I thought it came from Holland.
Okay. We did get a grant for it. So how our system works, this is from a couple years ago. Our ewes winter here at home. The rams go out on Christmas Day for the ewe flock. So that we aim to have lambs born about the May long weekend. So starting about that Friday, Saturday of the May long weekend is usually when we anticipate our first lambs hitting the ground. Sometimes it's a couple days before, sometimes it's not till the Monday or Tuesday, but it's somewhere around that weekend. And the lambs or the ewes get moved. So they winter here and we move them to the solar site once there's grass. So this year, that was the last week of April.
April 26th.
Yeah, something like that. The 2 years previous, though, it was more like May 10th, May 12th. It was, so it all depends on your season. So we are allowed on site whenever there is grass. So the earlier spring we have, the better. And they stay there until the snow flies, basically. So far, they have come home the second week of November, pretty much. And we just sort of play each year by year as far as when they're going to come home. The biggest issue is, sorry, Chris, go ahead.
Okay, so moving there the 26th of April this year, is it ideal grazing conditions? No. But we're not getting paid to be there to graze. We're getting paid there to do vegetation abatement. And we have certain areas on the site where we have species where the sooner we can get there, the better. So that's a big thing.
Yeah, it is a big consideration for solar grazing is we are sometimes the principles of proper grazing management sometimes butt up with the principles of vegetation abatement, and that's where they differ in that we all want similar things. I don't know where it is. Hang on, Churcher. Our 3-year-old is underfoot. Hang on. We want similar things in that we want the ground to be covered. We want species mix. We don't want a ton of weed species. We don't want tall plants, that sort of stuff. But realistically, the most important thing to the solar site is that we don't shade the panels or have anything growing up in between the panels. So sometimes that means something like we would never turn the sheep out at home end of April when there's hardly any grass, but we would move them to the solar when we have acres that we can put them on.
And know that they're going to be trimming, like they're going to strip the bark off those trees that we don't want to grow.
Yes. So
look at those goobas.
So we do have so with solar grazing, what we did was we secured the vegetation abatement contract. So we are actually paid to be in the solar, and it is a 200-acre site. It is a huge undertaking, and as much as yes, it's a lot of grass for our sheep, it's also a lot of work. We have invested heavily in more sheep. Yep. We have invested in fences. We've also had to hire staff. And of course, there's just the extra work that goes along with keeping sheep healthy. There's water management, all those sorts of things. So we also have to carry extra insurance and those sorts of things. So it has allowed us to expand our flock, but it also has required that we expand our flock. So that's a capital investment as well, in that in order to actually effectively cover the site, you need a critical mass of animals. And you need to, they can't see us, and we needed to grow very quickly to do it. Chacha, what do you need?
So, if just a quick second on this picture, if you look, there's this 7-foot high fence with barbed wire on top. Should be fantastic control. It slows them down because they have to go underneath it, but they do go underneath it. Wearing hard hats is a must on the site because like health and safety is huge there. It's not, if you have an issue, health and safety is going to be an issue. It is, hey, we have techs on site all the time. So if they see us without hard hats or a shirt with no sleeves or wearing shorts or not wearing steel toe boots or anything like that, like we have to wear protective equipment. And this year was an even bigger challenge that way.
Okay. So for anyone who has sheep, they probably recognize this image of a case of the sheeps, as we like to call it, in that there's no reason for her to be under there. She just decided it would be fun to try and get the dog food. We'll talk about dogs in a minute. But for anyone who's curious, so it is a 200-acre site. We estimate it's about what? We estimate it's about 180 acres under panels. We are currently running about 400 animals on site. Chris and our summer students, they basically fence every day to every 2 days because the sheep move every day to every 2 days. So we use net fencing, we use a solar powered generator, and we move the sheep almost daily, sometimes every 2 to 3 days, depending on the time of year or where we are in the site, if we can use an exterior fence. But they get moved quite regularly so that we are systematically moving our way through the entire grid of the solar panels, because ultimately we're not just there to graze, we're there to do a job, which is keep all the vegetation from growing in front of the panels or in between. So, and as much as the sheep are very happy and they move themselves between paddocks very well, they still do stupid things like this. Yes, darling?
So mixing the vegetation abatement to best grazing management is the setting that stocking density that all the grass is controlled in that 1 day or 2 days, and then getting them moved, and then trying to wait that ideally about 40 days before we get back there again. And that's to help control the parasites in the sheep. So right now we've been on April 26th to, what is it, October?
Yeah, we're 5 months in.
21st.
Almost. We're almost 5 months. Yeah.
No oil drenches. No parasite. What do you want to call them?
Well, I think
we haven't dewormed.
Yeah. We haven't dewormed anything. Just
No.
that we did bring some brown lambs home that we did.
Yes.
But that's it.
And we do fecal samples. We do work with our vet.
Yes, that is really important. So
our vet client, because we're the client or patient.
It's a vet client patient relationship, and so we have a standing vet client patient relationship with our vet. We work very closely with our vet. We just did last week. We did some fecal sampling.
His name is Don, and he is dreamy.
Okay, stop. He is kind of dreamy. Anyway, but we have used dewormers in our market lamb flock when we brought them home, as well as some coccidiostats with a couple of them. But moving the sheep often and not going back on the same piece is really key. And those are some lessons we learned in the first 2 years. This year, Chris has done a great job in planning out the grazing so that we can give the lamb that rest in between and really avoid putting young animals on anything that's been grazed previously in the year, because that's where we run into issues. We would really prefer to not deworm if we don't have to, but we 100% will. Obviously, we're not going to let our flock suffer with a high worm load if we can help it. So we are trying to use preventative strategies, but we will absolutely deworm if needed. But we will do that based on condition of the ewes, symptoms that we're seeing, and then a fecal test. So we just got back our latest fecal tests, and our vet was very happy with them. We do have a couple poopy bums, but we actually, because the rain came late in the summer.
Yeah, it's been attributed to the lush feed. We're less than 50 eggs per
per example. Yeah. So we're good. So that's awesome. People always ask, how do we water our sheep? And this is for other farmers that we have talked to.
We give them water.
Okay, but it is something to consider in that not all solar sites have a water source. And because this site, it is 200 acres, but one of the 100-acre pieces used to be a farm with a house and barns and the whole bit. So there is a well on site that we have access to. What you're seeing in this image is an old manure spreader that Chris changed over to
it's a 327 New Holland.
Nobody cares. It's equipment. It just needs to do what it should do. Anyway, that is what's on there. What you're seeing is that's a water tote. We also have the solar energizer on there, as well as the dog food, and we move those by quads. What's interesting is in the very early part of the season, we hardly use any water, just like right now in the late part of the season. But in the summer, they do go through quite a bit of water.
A smaller surface area with a float is preferred to the like the big tank. And so in this one, we have 2 big tanks that you see there. I think they're about 300.
They're 150 liters.
150 liters. There's 2 of them. That sucks on really hot days because we should be there twice, and on really hot days you're probably trying to do hay too, so not ideal.
Yeah. So what Chris did this year is we have a second one of these tenders, and he set up a bucket on a float, and essentially that means that the ewes would have access to that full tote, and that worked a lot better. We only had it got knocked over once or twice, but other than that, it worked really well.
Yeah, I got that figured out.
Yeah. Okay. So a key part, and Chris, maybe you want to talk about this, but we could not farm like we do without the dogs that we have. And so we have 2 types. We have herding dogs. And so in the top left-hand corner, that's Dash, who is our main herding dog. She's half blue heeler and mostly border collie with a little bit of Australian shepherd. And just a hint of Pomeranian, as Chris likes to tell people. Anyway, she's incredibly talented. We did breed her to a border collie. We kept one of her pups, who is now almost a year old and is our herding dog in training. Definitely, we could not move our sheep like we do without them. They're absolutely key.
So I grew up moving sheep with a bucket of grain or a 4-wheeler. Where are the numbers now where if you used a bucket of grain, you would get killed? And if you tried to use a 4-wheeler, they would cause a crazy amount of chaos before that 4-wheeler was up to temperature to actually be able to taste them. So the dogs, like, you step out the door, you snap your fingers, they're ready to go.
Yeah, they love it.
Huge difference.
Yeah.
I guess the next thing would be the guardian dogs. So before Lindsay was here, working with me and I had sheep, I did we're going to lock them in at night. We're not going to give them too much area. Coyotes found us, and I had 36 kills in 2 months. So that's more than every second day I was finding a sheep killed by coyotes. And even though parasites are a bigger production limiter and cost, the devastation of finding coyote kills wears on your, I don't want to use the buzzword mental health, but I will. It destroys you. I tried the llamas. I had them come into a burn and tear the throat out of a 250-pound ram. And
he lived. You managed to.
So Canadian Arcot, great breed if you have coyote pressure. And we use a lot of Canadian Arcot. But like, we're in the city of Ottawa, so we have all the overflow coyotes that they're breeding in the city and coming out to the country for new territory. And we have a lot of, we're not wide open like some parts of this province. So we have a lot of the fence lines. We have a lot of tree, swamps, rock cuts, all that kind of stuff. That's coyote habitat. We're in a like really high coyote concentration, but good fences, which like one middle picture really doesn't show because it's kind of flagging a little. I'll talk to.
But having super good power on our fences is the first step. But having dogs, good is the second part.
And a good dog stays with their sheep.
Yeah.
A good dog doesn't chase their sheep. They just stay with their sheep.
And they bark if you show up, and they alert, and they guard their own food, but mostly they just stay with their sheep.
That and lazy. Lazy dogs are good dogs.
Because they stay with their sheep, they nap with their sheep, and they work all night and they sleep all day. So the picture to the far right is our newest recruit just this summer when we picked her up. And actually the middle picture, she is the dog. At the bottom there, the smaller pup. It is amazing how quickly they grow, because that's only about 2 months between those two pictures, to be honest.
Yep. And the thing with a bad dog, you'll know when you have a bad dog. And you have two choices, but they're both get rid of it.
Yeah, you can't keep a dog that's either...
It's an unfortunate reality, but bad dogs are bad dogs.
Bad dogs mean dead sheep. Either they kill the sheep directly or they're letting coyotes kill them. So bad dogs have to go. There's no keeping them. We can get into the environmental side of what we do. It's a pretty huge push of what we do. But I have a agronomy and media background. Chris has a strong farming background. We are very
That means keen. I swear a lot.
Yeah, exactly. But we're super keen on, not using land per se, but making the most of the land that we have and using sheep to be a part of that habitat. On the site that we are on, they also do house bees. And we are cognizant of that we think it's actually a really good mix and a really good fit because of the site and how we manage it. There's basically flowering plants all summer long, and that's great for the bees, which is great for the surrounding areas. It's great for our sheep, and the beekeepers are super happy because we don't use any herbicides or any pesticides, even though we understand where they should be used and how they should be used. But the fact that we don't need to use them means that the beekeepers know that they can house their bees on a site where they don't have to worry about any of those sorts of things.
Okay. So also the beekeepers are jerks and geeks.
Hey, stop.
Geez, bees. They blocked me on...
Don't.
Okay.
Anyway, they do great. I want to point out, because this is one of the best pictures I think that Chris has ever taken of the non-sheep part of our solar experience. But that right there on the left is a nest that birds have made using wool that they picked up off the ground, as well as other things. So it is super cool to find stuff like this on site. But one of the things that's really cool from the biodiversity side is there are so many spiders and so many monarchs and so many insects and so many birds. And there is, when you go up top, and we love to do this when we tour people on the site, and one day I hope that any of you who want to come tour can, once we get through this COVID thing. When we tour the site down below, people realize...
I think you mean COVID.
No, COVID-19. When we tour the site, people realize like how much life is down below. There's so many different species of plants and forbs and legumes. There's so many birds and spiders and whatever. And then when you go up top and you see the site from high up, it just looks like glass. And I can totally understand why people think that solar sites are like industrial and metal and not alive, but there's actually an amazing amount of biodiversity that still happens below the panels. And in fact, I would argue that in a lot of ways, a solar site can be better for the ground and for the plants and for the flora and fauna than a lot of fields would be, because they go undisturbed.
Especially soybeans that get plowed.
Well, it goes undisturbed, right? And we know that in a very hot, dry year, the panels actually provide shade for the plants underneath. So you actually end up with plants that stay alive through a drought that wouldn't normally have necessarily, which maintains habitat. So it's pretty cool. On to the challenges. It's not all perfect. It's not all roses, of course. We have had to face some challenges on the cash side, and that we've been trying to grow a business very quickly, and that requires some cash outlay, holding back a lot of females, which means we're not necessarily marketing all of our lamb. We did learn a lot from 2019.
Also, not marketing all the animals we should be, because we've been keeping females back that we probably shouldn't have been keeping back.
That's true. Yeah, that is one of the things that we are working to address this year. Is we will, when we introduce our ewe lamb flock to the rams, we will pregnancy scan, and we will make some pretty hard decisions on keeping back ewe lambs. In that we just needed to bump our numbers to get the.
We needed mouths.
Yeah, we needed mouths to eat grass. Yeah. Yes. One of the things though, babe, is in 2019 we dealt a lot with fly strike. This year we had less of it. I think we've done.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, we did a better job on fly strike.
So part of that fly strike thing is a lot of it, I think, came from the feet.
Mm-hmm.
And
we've been culling. Yeah.
I like carrying this red spray. So a lot of people would think like red spray can versus green spray can. Red means go versus green means go.
Green means she needs to go.
If you spray her with green paint, that means go away.
Yeah.
So if I've noticed you for a reason, you need to go away.
Yeah.
Some people, like, you'll talk to them like, how often do you trim feet? Well, every 6 months, once a year, just when we're shearing. Me, right before they go on the truck, that I don't get a little pink slip back saying this animal shouldn't have been shipped.
So yeah, about the only feet we trim now are maybe on a ram that didn't stay here. That's it.
Yeah, and we like we ship direct to slaughter. We're not shipping direct
through the sale barn. Yeah, that's key. We make okay. Okay, so this is actually a relatively recent image. I think this is just from this past week. So this is some of the lambs from
Monday.
This spring. Yeah. One of the things that we do at home, so our rams do stay home year round, in that we don't want to have lambs when we don't want them. So we do separate our ewes and lambs. It also means that we bring our market lambs, our ram lambs home, but our ram lambs do go back onto grass when they come here. And also we are definitely expanding our horizons on silvopastures. So using the woodlots that we have perhaps more effectively. We want to maintain them as woodlots and as a maple bush for sure, but we think that the sheep can do a good job in clearing out some of that underbrush and
undesired species that are invasive, like hawthorns, prickly ash. They're not native species, so, and they have no value as far as timber. So what has value as timber as oaks, white pine, and maple. Yeah. And we really appreciate seeing those. I mean, like the fantastic colors this time of year. Who doesn't love going leafing? But like you notice them nibbling at the goldenrod there.
They eat a lot of goldenrod.
They love eating goldenrod, and cattle are lazy at it.
Yeah, but cattle eat other things. Anyway, so one of the things though that obviously our business is, I mean, we raise sheep, we sell lamb for sure. We don't just do the vegetation abatement, but we are working at building a brand of what our lamb is, of being grass raised, of being grass fed, all the things that we value in the environment and how we farm, and our value that we put on local food and shortening our food chains. These are things that we are working to build our network of restaurants and butchers and even just individual customers who are interested in buying local, or who want grass-fed, or who like what we're doing, frankly. And so that's one of the things that we really want to connect with. And I will say, if there is a benefit to COVID for us, at least, we very much, starting in April, and it continues even now and is picking up again, we have had an incredible uptick in direct orders for half and whole lamb for people who are very much looking to fill their freezers. So you know, I don't want COVID to be happening, and I'd rather we all be back to, you know, sort of normal per se, but people definitely
cut your own carcass is a fun thing.
Yeah, okay, so, and that is one very cool thing just recently, and we are very keen on that. We did have someone approach us about potentially buying a whole carcass and butchering it themselves as far as the cutting of the meat, and we are super keen. So we dropped off the lamb to a licensed abattoir. The abattoir did the actual kill and stripping out, and then they picked up the whole carcass to take home and do up. And we'd love to do more of that. We think it's super cool, and there's lots of people who are interested in it.
We think it's really super cool because during COVID, it means that the meat cutters have less time where they're standing close to each other. Yeah. So that's a really good thing. Also, it saves us money and makes us money. So always think that way, because that's dumb if you don't.
It's a business.
There was another thing, and I can't remember. Oh, it means we get preferential treatment with our abattoir because they can just kill and kick it out. It's less freezer space.
Yep. And this is something that, and I don't know how much you guys have talked about this.
So instead of getting 3 lambs in, we can probably get 8.
Yeah. So, and
when they're tight for space.
Yeah, it is one of the things that definitely, especially as we move into the winter months, abattoirs are full. And it is nice to be able to get in to have our meat done when we need it done. You talk about this. I just have to tell them about our winter system.
Oh, okay. So wool, what a fantastic resource. Merp. We're in Ontario. The best use we get out of our wool is that it's on their sheep's back for the winter, because the wool we produce is kind of garbage as far as what is most marketable right now. We aren't producing stuff that's fantastic for Italian suits. Having said that, I believe there is an excellent opportunity for not just Canadian wool, but Ontario wool, and finding a niche. I don't even want to say just a niche. Finding an opportunity for that wool long term. I want to think about stuff like wool polymers, where wool replaces oil plastics. That we develop a plastic that's biodegradable, that's made from wool, and that's like, God,
Pretty cool stuff.
I'm not smart enough to do that.
But there's even wool as wool. I think realistically, people are starting to learn that a lot of their clothing is actually partially plastic, and that using wool in the traditional sense of clothing is still valuable as well. But I'd like to see things like insulation or mats, like all sorts of other stuff.
I think insulation's kind of a lazy thing.
Well, sure, but we don't do it here, and in the U.S. they do, so we should. Anyway, the most value.
Why do you love Trump so much?
Oh, stop! The most value we get from our wool, though, is that our sheep can handle winter.
I already said that.
Yes, and so one of the big things is we don't put our sheep in a barn, but we do.
Oh, I didn't say that part.
Right, we do provide them with what they need to winter outside. We do provide them shelter.
Tire tracks?
Okay, no.
Wait, no.
We feed them well. They have gullies and coulees and areas for shelter. We don't have
coulees. We're in Ontario.
Oh, stop.
Lindsay's from Manitoba.
I am from Manitoba. But we have a wonderful wooded area that ahead of a storm or those sorts of things, Chris will always put the hay into so that they can eat while they weather a storm. They do eat snow for their water source, but for the most part, we have a water source for them and have a way to get them water if need be. But for the most part, they do an amazing job at.
And these are dry use.
Yeah, dry use only. That's a key point. Yeah.
Lindsay, can I jump in here for a second?
Yeah, for sure.
Please.
Hannah share in the chat that wool can also be used to clean up oil spills in the ocean.
Yeah. It totally can. So wool is amazing.
There are no sheep in the ocean.
There are no sheep in the ocean, but we can put wool in the ocean.
Probably.
Yes. So wool can be like, it's hypoallergenic. It's not easily burned. It is biodegradable. So here's a bit of a sad story.
It definitely isn't easily burned.
No. So here's a bit of a sad story though. Wool right now is so worthless on the world scale because China has essentially stopped buying wool because of COVID.
Non-tariff trade barrier.
Yes, it is. They basically stopped buying wool, but we actually we did pay our shearer to shear all our sheep. It was not a cheap bill, but we actually chose to compost our wool because the value to us in our wool is to put back on the land in nutrients. That's basically, we will get more out of it by composting it and putting it back on our land than we would have got sending it anywhere. And our wool isn't great. We have some burrs, we have some whatever, but it's also, to me, it should be worth more than that, but it's not. And so we need to feed our, displace some of the bought in inputs by composting it. We 100% will. But I will make a note, and it is on the slide, in the States, they are doing quite a bit of solar grazing. And in America, for whatever reason, at least on the east side of the country, they actually have a lot more hair sheep. They have a lot more Katahdins. And now they were developed in the States, so I don't know if that's part of it, but.
This is a sheep and goat club.
Oh, so they have goats too.
Stop trying to sell Katahdins.
No, I'm not trying to sell them, but
it's okay for the goat people.
It is.
They want to be here.
Stop.
Look at those stunners.
So that's the end of our formal presentation. These two lads, this is Hank and Aaron. Hank is on the right, Aaron is on the left. One of our challenges absolutely is getting genetics that work for what we do because we're not barn based, because we're grass based. So we actually are,
And we don't show sheep.
we are for the most part bringing in genetics from Western Canada because they are more closely aligned with what we need in a ram. And they are selecting for grass lambing and growth on grass and that sort of stuff. So these two lads, their first lambs hit the ground this past spring, and we will likely bring in a few more next year. And we do have, this year will be a very small Canadian Arcot registered flock. We'll start very small, but that is a challenge. We definitely have to look pretty far away to find the kind of rams that we want. So with that, we'll start questions. We'll get out of here and hop back on.
And Michael's HM.
Okay, thanks. There. Remove that.
Okay.
Okay, does anyone have any questions?
That was great. I just think Riley wanted to turn off the recording before we got into too many questions. I don't know.
Is it because of swearing?
Possibly. It's a sheep and goat club. They probably swear a lot. Yeah.
I don't know
Most
if Riley's there to turn it off, but if it keeps going, then it keeps going.
Okay. Well, I suppose it's up to anyone.
You can always
else.
edit it later, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
I guess just knock it off or whatever.
You could just bleep a bad question or something like that.
No, that's not true. Okay, so we can wait. We can wait till the recording.
Problem.
Okay.